They may be called the next generation, but they're the church of today. Reach, disciple, and mobilize students to share the hope of the gospel. This is the GenSend Podcast with Shane Pruitt, Paul Worcester, and Lacey Villasenor.
Hey friends, welcome to another episode of the GenSend Podcast. It's been an incredible season. I hope you're enjoying listening to these because we are having a blast talking about them. And it's always so much fun, because I'm over here writing things down. So if you watch the video version, again, that's just another plug for the YouTube channel, GenSend YouTube channel, where you can see us having these conversations. Is a lot of times I'm looking away because I'm typing stuff on my phone or writing stuff down, notes. So as we're talking about this, I'm learning a lot, being encouraged a lot. So I pray that you are as well. If you are, again, just give us that rating. It helps us. And share it. Share the episodes that bless you. Share those with other adults, leaders, friends, students, young adults themselves. It's so much fun. And I'm so excited about the topic we are talking about today. But before we jump into the topic today, we do want to encourage you, check out the webinar in May. It's going to be amazing. We're going to talk about reaching Gen Alpha. If you're in youth ministry, you know they're there. You're ready. And that's the generation that will be there for the next decade. If you're in college or young adult ministry, don't sit this out, because this is the future of your ministry. This is what will be in your ministry very soon for a very long time. So be sure to jump in that webinar, get registered. We're going to have an amazing time. It's going to be a fun conversation with multiple different people speaking on that, interjecting on that. And as always, will be a time for Q&A. But let's talk about what we're going to talk about today, because honestly, Paul, Lacey, I'm excited about this conversation. I'm sure y'all as well, because really what we're going to talk about today are some of my heroes in the faith. That's volunteer leaders, bivocational leaders, covocational leaders. Lacey, you're going to explain the difference between that. But those are some of my heroes. I was a bivocational leader. Paul, I know you are as well. Lacey, you're in that kind of season right now with being part of planting a church and working at NAM and or really co-vocational. You'll explain all that later. That's kind of a teaser. Yeah, but I'm excited about this conversation today. Paul, Lacey, how are y'all feeling about this?
Oh yeah, I couldn't put it any better than you did. But the people that work full-time jobs or part-time jobs and then do ministry on the side, it's not really on the side. They're devoting themselves to these students, man. Again, these guys are our heroes. These guys and girls are our heroes. They are, it's such a generous thing to do, to invest in the next generation in a way that's sacrificial. And I think that's the kind of thing that honors God. And so I just want to encourage anyone out there that is making that sacrifice. Man, think about how much it would cost for your church to pay you to do what you do. It would be a lot. But that's a great thing that honors God, and that is like a kind of just a offering to Him. And so first of all, I just want to say thank you loud and clear to anyone that's in that bivocational, covocational, part-time space, whatever it may be. So that's my first thing I wanted to get off my chest here. But
yeah, I am definitely feeling this live. It's funny, last week I would, finish the workday, and then we're in the process of building our website right now. And then I would just spend the rest of the evening building our website, creating all the things, ordering all the stuff for our interest meetings. So I am just so grateful for people that I can't imagine, how hard that is, especially when you add kids into the mix. And two of our best youth leaders that we had at our church in Texas, they were both teachers, and they both had kids, and they served in the student ministry, and they were some of our most faithful volunteers. And I was like, wow, I can't imagine being with middle schoolers all day as a teacher, and then just pouring yourself out again in the evenings to more middle schoolers and high schoolers. But they just loved it, and they felt so called to that generation. And I'm so thankful for them. And obviously they were very gifted at it, and have just made such an impact on so many students because of the way that they've chosen to pour themselves out. And so a lot of this conversation has sparked from conversations with you guys. Paul and Shane have talked to so many of you that are in that bivocational, covocational season. And so as we were thinking about what should we dive into? This just kept coming up because we're like, there's so many, especially in the next gen space, that are living this life and doing this grind. And so I've even had in the church planning world, many have said like, hey, bivocational and covocational ministry, this is the future of the church for all roles, not just next gen ministry, or not just worship pastor, not just lead pastor. Like, this is the future of the church. And actually Lifeway has reported that 47% of pastors now report having a second job, and 50 to 60%, this is kind of a rough estimate, of SBC churches are served by bivocational leaders in some kind of role. And again, we know this is true for so many of you. And so we just want to start with something really practical. We want to keep this conversation short. We know that you're busy, especially if you're in this world. And so Paul, Shane, you guys give really good advice in your coaching networks about healthy time management, balancing kind of the family ministry life. What are some of those principles that would even apply here? What do you think, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole bunch we could go off of. And, actually, I went through a season with my wife's health issues where I was raising financial support to do the college ministry I was doing. Our ministry was growing, thriving. We were seeing hundreds of people come to Christ every year. But my wife was basically stuck in her chair 24/7. She could get up for 15, 20 minutes at a time. But, and then 2 young kids as well. So it was kind of like, it felt like taffy. You've seen that old school taffy that's like pulled in all the different directions. I know there's some people listening on the call, on the podcast right now that are like, that is your story, is you feel like that taffy. I would say there's several things that helped me that I've kind of learned the hard way. Is I've actually had a kind of some new thoughts on this lately. Is I think excellence is good. Excellence honors God. But excellence in the way some people view it can become an idol, where they get to the point where everything has to be so perfect, every event needs to be polished and to the T on timing, and actually that ends up shooting ourselves in the foot for a number of reasons. It puts stress on us that's unnecessary. To hit a home run every week, a lot of ministry leaders, we compare ourselves to the mega church pastor that's strutting around the stage, that spent 30 hours on his message, and we have 3, and so how can you compare yourself with that? Another thing about that, the whole excellence thing is, it's students, they prefer more authentic, raw. It doesn't need to be perfect, and sometimes that actually connects with them better. And then also, if we're really relying on the Spirit of God, sometimes the Holy Spirit doesn't play by our timelines. Like, if we have our, okay, we're going to spend 10 minutes doing this, 5 minutes doing this, sometimes the Holy Spirit just wants to do more. And so we want to have a little bit of wiggle room, a little bit of flexibility. And I think I personally experienced this in our ministry, our local ministry in Chico. I was so stressed about the performance aspect that I ended up sending a vibe to our other leaders and even the students themselves that this was a big deal, that this was something to get stressed out of. They caught it from me. I didn't say this, but they caught my stress and they caught that. And it ended up I had to repent of that later and just be like, hey, it's going to be good enough. Sometimes you got to embrace the good enough principle. And so that's just one thing I'm really passionate about right now. Got a few more, but man, what do you got? You got anything on this, Shane?
Yeah, that's so helpful. I think for me, I look back and it's like, man, when I was a local church youth pastor, starting out at 24, which is scary to think about. I mean, my age, and I know there's some 24-year-old youth pastors that listen to this podcast. I was working at a Mexican food restaurant, which there's a chain here in Dallas of barbecue restaurants called Soul Man's, and it is so good. Lacey, Soul Man's, but they did an experiment one time where Soul Man's franchise opened a Mexican food restaurant because it was called Senor Soul Man's, and so I worked at Senor Soul Man's and was doing youth ministry, and then was courting a young lady by the name of Casey Lynn Williford, who later became Casey Lynn Pruitt. And so you're balancing all of that. You're wanting to be faithful in ministry. And so I used to use this word balance all the time. And probably about, 4 or 5 years ago, this was really a cheat code that really gave me a lot of freedom that I wish I would have learned earlier is that really I stopped using the word balance and started using the word harmony, because I think sometimes we put this unfair pressure on us to go, okay, for every hour of ministry, now I got to use that, have an hour of family time to say I'm in balance, or an hour of work, hour of ministry, hour of family to say I'm in balance. And sometimes it's harmony. And just go through the seasons, trust in the Lord that some seasons it may feel like you're doing more ministry than family time. Or it may seem like you're doing more family time than ministry time. Or more work. It's just kind of be in harmony. The one thing I really want to encourage you on, because Paul already laid out some great things, is to really see it all as a marathon. Because if you're trying to sprint in your family time, you're trying to sprint in your ministry time, you're trying to sprint in your work, vocational time, you will get wore out. And then you're not going to be great to anyone. So I would just say, see it as a marathon, pace yourself, take good, care of yourself. For me, I got to kind of write things out. There is an old cliche that's true. If you're not managing your calendar will manage you. So I'd just say calendar well, put in time with the Lord, put in time of dating, if you're married, dating your spouse, put in time where you're going to work on the ministry, time where obviously you got to be at your job. You can't control that. So I just wouldn't put a lot of your pressure of yourself on balance, but just be in harmony, making sure that you are walking with the Lord, you're resting, you're Sabbathing, you're leading from the overflow of your own worship of Jesus.
It's so good. Only other thing I would piggyback on or just kind of add to the conversation is leaders raising up, delegating and raising up other leaders is going to be, that should be your goal, whether you're a full-time staff member, part-time, all the different options. Man, the best person to reach, we say this all the time, so it gets a little bit repetitive, but the best person to reach a student is another student. And then also adult volunteers are a gold mine of ministry help. And so really, if you are leading a youth ministry, collegiate ministry, whatever it may be, man, your top priority is to raise up and train other leaders. It's not how much ministry you can do yourself, it's how much you can empower others to do ministry. And so that's kind of you need to constantly be a recruiter and a delegator and an empowerer. And so delegate everything, almost everything you possibly can. I love the quote by Dawson Trotman, never do anything of importance that others can or will do when there's so much of importance that others cannot or will not do. And so that is such a key thing, is make sure you're only doing what only you can do. And even teaching, looking at my time blocks, when I have a fresh talk that I have to prepare, that's a good chunk of time. And so look for ways that you can recruit other people to guest teach. Maybe there's also some video teaching you can do. I know Shane has some great video-based Bible studies you could use. Sometimes you can be creative. Or if it's a small group, maybe make it more of a discussion. Read a book together. If you have 20 or less, maybe that's more of a Bible study discussion than a full-on sermon that you're preaching. And so don't just think you have to preach a 30-minute sermon that you spend 20 hours preparing. Be creative and do. I actually hate to see that, because if it's a small group and you're spending all your time preparing a message when you could be spending time with students, I would much prefer you spend that relational evangelism discipleship time with students during the week than to be hiding in your office message prep. So message prep is important, but I think we got to make sure that we're putting our emphasis on what's going to make the biggest kingdom impact, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that you just talking about message prep reminded me, our team at Send Network, they have created a lot of resources for anybody who's in bivocational or covocational ministry. And we have a newchurches.com website. It's geared towards church planners, but there are some great articles on how to prep a sermon if when you work 40 hours and how do you prep outside of that 40 hours. And so those are some really, really great resources. They're all available for free. I'll link that specific article in the show notes if you want to dive into that, and maybe it'll give you some ideas on how to calendar structure your week for writing a message. And then I'll also link, we have a website just for covocational and bivocational people, and they do a monthly Zoom call, and it's super practical, super helpful. So we'll make sure to link all that in the show notes. But again, we just here at NAM in general, we really believe this is a huge part of the future of the church. And so we've actually provided some definitions. The team over that has created those resources has defined a bivocational versus a covocational minister for us. And so I want to give those definitions just as we continue to have this conversation to help us understand the difference. And so they've defined a bivocational minister as someone who works a second job to supplement the salary that the church provides. And this is typically seen as temporary until the church, or if it's a ministry, can grow enough to provide full-time financial support. And so just think bivocational, how they've defined it, is temporary until until you can go full-time. And then they've defined covocational as somebody who just has a clear calling to the marketplace, some kind of marketplace job or role, and they don't intend to leave. This is not a temporary thing for them, but they feel called to start a ministry or to start a church or to serve or pastor, whatever it is. And so they are going into this saying, I'm going to continue to do my marketplace job and I'm going to do this ministry job. And so those are kind of the definitions that they've had to help us kind of continue to have these conversations. But Shane, Paul, how does, as we just continue to think about this, how does having a secular job actually make a minister more effective in reaching and discipling students specifically? You know, a lot of times we say we want people to live on mission, so I feel like this is just one of the easiest ways to do that. But what do you guys think? Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, there are some advantages to being in the real world, the real marketplace in a lot of ways. It adds some credibility to people that are working full-time jobs. They look at you and they're like, hey, you know, there is this misunderstanding, and people joke with pastors all the time. They're like, hey, well, you got your 1 hour of work in for the week and because you gave your sermon, and they don't realize all the other stuff that they're doing. So there is that kind of misplaced understanding of what a full-time pastor does. But one of the advantages is it does add a little bit of credibility, a little bit of street cred to what you're doing. And then also it provides relational evangelism opportunities. You're in the trenches, wherever you're working, with tons of lost people, and you're able to rub shoulders and model the lifestyle that you're trying to reproduce in the lives of others. And so I think that's a huge one, is your ability to really model what you're hoping everyone in your church or ministry will live out. And so I think that's a huge one.
Yeah, I love that, Paul. And if you think about it too, like if you are covocational, you're in good company. Because Jesus was a carpenter and the Son of God. You know what I mean? It's like Paul wrote 2/3 of the New Testament, planted a lot of churches, and was a tent maker. You know, so you're in good company. You know, that's why I love bivocational leaders, covocational leaders, and I think this speaks to especially young adults and teenagers who are feeling a calling to ministry leadership. Lacey, you mentioned earlier, like many are saying this is the future of the church in the West. And I agree with that. And I think it also kind of, for lack of a better term, broadens the door for young people to go into ministry because, Paul, I know you run into this all the time. We've talked about it. How many times we're on university campuses and we'll do, we'll do like a class or a luncheon for those who feel called to ministry. And every single time I get this question, hey, what do I do? Because I feel torn. Like, I really feel called to be a nurse, but I also want to be in ministry too. Or I feel called, I really want to be a coach. Well, I want to be in ministry too. And I'm like, fantastic. Because first of all, like, what an asset you are to a church to go, oh man, your salary, your benefits are covered. But you also have this natural doorway into living on mission and being around people and ministering to people. What a great asset to the church. I think of a coach, and I just got this question a couple of weeks ago. That's why it's fresh in my heart, where this young man, he's in college going, I want to be a football coach, but I also want to be a youth pastor. I was like, what an all-star you would be to a church. You know what I mean? To go, because a lot of youth pastors are like, hey, how can I connect with the coaches? Or how can I be a chaplain for the football team? Or how can I get on the campus? you already got that solved, bro. You know what I mean? So what a
Yeah.
great asset that is. And so I want to say, like, man, not less than what an asset to the kingdom. So I would just say, first of all, Lacey, thank you for defining those, because I'll be honest, I've been kind of using those terms interchangeably. I think what you just laid out is perfect. Like, I love, yeah, bivocational. Sometimes that's for a season. That's been my story multiple times. When we planted C3, I also worked with a ministry who made video Bible studies. So I was calling youth pastors saying, you want to buy a video Bible study? And they're like, didn't you just do our D Now 2 weeks ago? And I'm like, yeah, so it's like, and then, so you're doing that, you're planting a church. At that time, married, Casey was pregnant. There's so much going on. There's so much going on with so many of you. I just say we've been there. And then covocational, where people go, man, I feel called to be this, but I also feel called to ministry. What a great calling that is. And like Paul, you said, man, like, for lack of a better term, that just gives you street cred. Because when you're talking about living on mission, it's not just theory for you. You're doing it on a daily basis. Yeah.
Yeah, one more advantage to this is you can go places and reach people that aren't the typical suburban person that's going to provide for financially. So you can reach class, like poor, less financially secure people. You can go to college campuses and reach people there. And so there's a typical way a church is funded by families that have money, and there's a certain type of people that can make a large church and provide for staff and things like that. But there's a ton of places, even in North America, that if you are covocational, you could go there and you could devote some real time and effort to reaching people that really no one else is reaching. Some of the places that are the flagship places to go plant churches, there's multiple churches going to plant, but man, go somewhere that no one else is going and do something that no one else is willing to do. That's powerful. I have some friends from the Acts 2 network. They're on about 40 different campuses, and they send teams of covocational planters to go plant a church near a college campus and their surrounding community. And so they'll have like 4 families all move together, and they're like lawyers. They're working like really intense jobs, but they're devoting their nights and weekends to investing in students. And they're seeing this movement of God across the nation and the world, really. They're starting to plant overseas because you can get jobs and do ministry overseas as well. So I think this covocational idea actually opens doors to church planting in new locations and demographics that other people might not go to as their first choice, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think anywhere, like, we're in an area that is very expensive, and then we're also in an area that has historically, even large churches, there's just low giving here because it's a very lost place, but then it's also, people are also handling the burden of it's a very expensive place to live. And so those two things make it really difficult, and it would be easy to say, oh, we just can't afford to go there. But if you're somebody who is able to step into this as a covocational leader, pastor, that just allows so many gospel opportunities to happen, allows you to be somewhere that maybe you couldn't be otherwise. And so, yeah, I totally agree. Shane, kind of going off of what you said, we're talking about how, hey, this is the future. It allows you to go to a lot of different places. We're already seeing half of pastors and ministry leaders are already Bivo or Covo. So how does this affect how we call out the called, prepare people, and train future church leaders in light of all this data, in light of this conversation that we're having? Paul, what do you think?
Yeah, I think that's huge. It's so important to even help it as we're coaching and encouraging young people that are considering vocational ministry, or ministry leadership is probably even a better way to put it, because sometimes it's not vocational. It's just a calling to ministry leadership. And I like to encourage them, if they're in college, get a degree that you can get a real job with, that is a marketable skill. And there's some people that they know they want to do Bible school. I'm not against Bible school, seminary, all that, but it can be really helpful, if possible, to get a major or pursue a career that can pay the bills, and then you can do ministry just as a covocational minister. And I think that, just not to say that's the only or even the best way all the time, but just to have it as one of the options that we're presenting when we talk about a call to ministry. We're saying, hey, covocational, bivocational, that is a viable option, and it's actually a preferable option for some people in some places. And so they hear that from us, because people often aren't called to things that they've never heard about. It's very rare for someone to just automatically feel called to something they don't know anything about. So we need to give them that category. That's our role as ministry leaders, as mobilizers, is we are helping giving categories for people: international missions, church planning, collegiate ministry, youth ministry, covocational, bivocational. We're kind of like laying out the paths before them and helping them discern what God might be calling them to do.
Yeah, I love that, Paul. I completely agree. And yeah, I just echo what Paul said of, like, when you're calling out the called, say you're the leader, you're the pastor, you're calling out the called, share as many examples as possible for people to serve. I think sometimes people think even a call in ministry means a calling to a stage. And that's just like a small part of it. Just sharing all the ways to be involved, all the ways to leave, all the ways to serve. And I think also giving permission to people to let them serve before they actually know what their specific calling is, because sometimes serving reveals calling. You know what I mean? So I would just say, like, encourage people to jump in. And when they jump in, they may go, oh, definitely not called to do that. Well, that's a good, valuable lesson to learn, you know? If somebody gets in and goes, man, I love doing this. I feel alive in this. I feel like I'm in the center of God's purpose for my life. Man, praise the Lord for that. Also, I would say there's another piece that it may seem small, but it's such an impact, is I really want to encourage more leaders to share their testimony of calling. See, a lot of times we share our testimony of how we got saved, how we became a follower of Jesus, but rarely do we share our testimony of calling. And, you know, just kind of like we all shared, like, oh man, this is what God's doing in my life. You know, there was a season I was bivocational. Lacey, you're in that covocational season of life. Like, share those stories, because stories impact stories for the glory of God. Very few people graduate out of Bible college or seminary and get a full-time job immediately. There is this path of whether it's bivocational or this calling of covocational, or there's a long season of volunteering. So I think just a lot of times sharing those stories, sharing those testimonies, sharing the journey with people and letting students know, oh, I can jump into that, because there is a dynamic shift with Gen Z and Gen Alpha, even over millennials and Gen Z. I feel like, or millennials and Gen Xers, excuse me. I feel like when Gen Xers and millennials, that group, those generations, when they were younger, they were like, all right, let's just do it. We'll figure it out. You know, like, let's fly the plane and we'll build it as we're going. And I feel like those generations were kind of okay doing that. One of the big shifts we've seen in Gen Z and Gen Alpha is Gen Z and Gen Alpha are so risk averse. And some of that is because of the pandemic and all of those things. So now Gen Z and Gen Alpha are risk averse, where before Gen Z or Gen Xers and millennials were like, oh, let's just do it. We'll figure it out as we go. Now Gen Z, Gen Alpha, they want to know the whole plan before they commit. Like, they want to know all the details. How's this going to work out? What's the plan? And then we'll commit. Well, you know, share different stories. Let them see that. And some of it is teaching them, all right, well, you got to take a step of obedience. You got to take a step of faith. You're not going to know how it all pans out. But I think a lot of times it relieves those fears when you can share all the opportunities, but also share the stories of what God's done. Because, again, I think stories impact stories for God's glory. You know?
Yeah, and Paul mentioned this earlier, but even sharing the stage. And so not only does that relieve, you know, your teaching calendar, but if you have a volunteer or just somebody who is interested in teaching or is really gifted at teaching the Bible, like asking them to teach, and then those students will see like, oh, this person has a normal marketplace job, and then they're also teaching on Wednesday night or Thursday night or whenever you gather. We would do that with those teachers that I mentioned earlier. He would teach on Sunday morning sometimes and even on Wednesday nights every now and then. And that was so cool because there would be students who came from his middle school and then would see their teacher teaching the Bible and they're like, oh, wow, this is, and clearly he's gifted at teaching. He's a teacher. And so just utilizing even those, if you're not bivocational or covocational, that allows that, students to see like all these different pathways that they could serve the church and go into ministry. But I want to end with something really fun. So if you guys had to start a new ministry or a new church, whatever you're thinking about, today was $0 and you had a 40-hour-a-week secular marketplace job, what's the first thing you do on Monday morning? What are the 2 or 3 things you would prioritize? Paul, you go first.
Wow, that's a tough question, honestly. That is pretty gnarly. But I do think the first thing is prayer. Really devote yourselves to prayer. In Acts, they said we devote ourselves to the ministry of the word and to prayer. And so that's never going to change whether you're full-time, all the different options, part-time, covocational, bivocational, whatever it may be. Man, I actually tell this to a lot of collegiate leaders. An hour alone with God is almost required. Just to spend, not to say you to brag about it, but just to have enough margin where you're really connecting with God and slowing down and growing and stretching your prayer life. So that one, there's no excuses for it. If you skip that one, do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Okay, go back to square one. Spend alone time every day, about an hour, I would say. I'd recommend, honestly, put me on record, about an hour a day is what I would recommend for a ministry leader, really in the trenches. And then always make evangelism the front lines. And so I would rather have a smaller church or ministry that is actually focused on evangelism. And so that's not just preaching to the group, but also in the trenches in relational evangelism or even random evangelism, like personal evangelism. I'd rather have that be the front edge of starting a new ministry. So if you're full-time, you got to block out time, and that might be the night. So maybe join a CrossFit gym or go to the campus and go do surveys or whatever your target is. Make sure you're at lunch at the high school campus helping the Christian club if you're a youth minister. Find a way to get around real live lost people and sharing the gospel. Even track how many times did I share the gospel this week, and make that the first priority. So prayer, I don't know, you know that you're going to get this from me, right? Prayer, evangelism, and disciple making, training leaders. And so start asking God every day, God, give me a small group of committed student leaders or adult volunteers that can help me get this ministry off the ground. And you're probably going to find those people. Your best laborers for the harvest are in the harvest right now. And so the best way to find a future leader is to lead someone to Christ and start discipling them. And so that's why evangelism has to be the front edge of your ministry. And then from there, I want to recommend, especially if you're a next-gen ministry, always be radically student-led. Everything you can possibly do to put students in leadership, that's what I recommend. Is even more so than you think is wise or prudent. That's about when you've hit your sweet spot in delegating to student leaders. And so those are my 3 big things: prayer, evangelism. Block it in your time because you only have a limited amount of time. That's the first thing to go. And then delegating and empowering student leaders and adult volunteers. That's my
I love that.
things.
Yeah, that's great, Paul. There's really nothing I can add to that. So instead of just re-echoing what Paul said, there's only one thing that I would say what Paul just said in building the ministry. That's perfect. I would say the outward focus of a ministry to go, oh man, all right, $0. I'm by myself. $0. We're starting this thing from scratch. We got a little core team. One thing I would just say is, I would have 2 meetings as fast as possible. The mayor of the city or, a city councilman, whoever you can get in front of, And then the second one would be like a school or university director, superintendent, president. Because, and here's the question, here's how to get around people, here's how to serve, be in the community. It's just say, no agenda, where's the need in this city? Or where's the serving opportunities in this city? Because I think sometimes, especially in ministries, we put pressure on ourselves to start new things, begin new things. And those things may already exist in the city. They just need more people serving in them, right? Or that might be a need that the city has a different need, and you're trying to fit another need in that the city doesn't even have that need, or the school doesn't even have that need. But because you have this idea or something you're passionate about, you're trying to like answer a question the city's not even asking or the school is even asking, right? So find out what the needs are of the city, the campus. I think one thing where I would wish I would have understood earlier is like even $0 starting something from scratch is like, I'm not bringing God into that city. I'm not bringing God on that campus. I'm not bringing God in that situation. He's already there. He's omnipresent. He's already there. He already has a heart for that area. And in a way, he's already working. So how do we join the work that God's already doing and be a part of that and fit and, you know, hitting those felt needs? That was really always the heartbeat of C3 and still is today, is like, can we be so for the city, so for the campuses, that if our church ceases to exist tomorrow, the city would miss us, the schools would miss us. So like, get out there, but go, those 2 meetings. That's the only thing I would, Paul, everything Paul said, echo that. I would say, just add 2 meetings with a city leader and a school leader. Find out what those felt needs already are, and then step into those.
Yeah, and you'll be surprised. Those were 2 meetings we had, and they kind of check the evangelism, and then you'll be surprised it'll check the discipleship box, because we have had those meetings, and then we were surprised. Again, God was already at work. We were just coming in and joining him in his work, and there was a city leader who's a believer, who's thinking about may want to go into ministry or do something down the road, but it just loves the church, and he's been such a resource, and he's somebody that now we're discipling, and we're like, oh, he could one day be a leader or something like that. And then same thing on the other side, it's like, oh, when you ask the needs, then you're around a bunch of lost people, and they're asking questions. Why are you here? Why are you serving? Why do you have joy? All these things, and then you get to share your faith. And so those 2 meetings can really check some of those boxes that even Paul said. So those are great. Those are great additions. I'm going to link all the stuff we talked about in the show notes, that covocational website we have, the new church's website, and articles that we have. So hopefully those are just practical, helpful resources to you guys. And we hope this conversation was helpful as you just reach, disciple, and mobilize the next generation as you work a 40-hour job or 30-hour job. But we're so thankful for you. You're our heroes, and we'll talk to you next time.